this Wednesday night, Alberta's pipeline push clears a major hurdle. How the federal government plans to get oil moving to BC, sparking a legal challenge from a First Nation.
We're doing this for all the other nations in Canada.
More Canadians quarantined over hantavirus fears, while a suspected outbreak of a different kind locks down another cruise ship. Growing the game. Which Canadian city is about to score a new professional women's hockey team? Plus, the Artemis 2 cruise mission to Parliament Hill.
This is the first time we've actually had a conversation on Earth, actually.
The special gift the astronauts brought from space.
Global National with Donna Friesen. Reporting tonight, Jeff Semple.
Good evening and thank you for joining us. We begin with the push to export more oil from Alberta. Global News has learned that the federal government has just struck a deal with that province to raise industrial carbon prices, and it opens the door to a new crude oil pipeline to British Columbia. Now, BC's premier is not happy, and an Alberta First Nation has launched a lawsuit over the energy projects. We'll have more on that in just a moment, but we begin with Mackenzie Gray and the details of the deal.
Are you willing to allow a new pipeline?
While the Prime Minister was tight-lipped in rainy Ottawa,
It's a thing called press conference. What we have.
Mark Carney and Alberta Premier Danielle Smith are expected to resolve a major sticking point to a potential new oil pipeline on Friday, increasing Alberta's industrial carbon tax. A source with direct knowledge of negotiations says Alberta is expected to increase their effective rate from $95 this year to $100 a ton by 2027, slowly increasing to $140 a ton by 2040. But even with the increase, that's below the current federally mandated level of $170 by 2030, a concern for BC's premier.
We will not be in a competitive position if Alberta has a special federal carbon price that the rest of us don't have access to in the rest of Canada.
The Alberta Industrial Carbon Tax works by forcing heavy emitters that exceed emissions allotments to buy credits or pay into a clean technology fund. A system Carney has argued hasn't functioned properly, with credits trading as low as $20 earlier this year. Details on how things will improve expected Friday.
This is a really great day for Albertans.
The upcoming announcement, a key part of the oil pipeline memorandum of understanding.
For a pipeline to be built, the industrial carbon price has to be on this path to increase in Alberta. Secondly, there has to be the Pathways project.
Progress on the Pathways carbon capture and storage project is unknown, with Ottawa, Alberta, and a consortium of energy companies involved in the project missing the MOU's April 1st deadline to sign a deal, a central part of Carney's branding for a new pipeline.
There is a grand bargain which pairs Pathways, a major decarbonization project, with a new pipeline.
Energy security concerns, thanks to the wars in Iran and Ukraine, should lead the Carney government to drop the carbon capture project requirement, according to this former Liberal member of Parliament.
Canada spending billions of dollars to have an effect of virtually no effect on global emissions just really doesn't make any sense right now.
While the carbon tax agreement is a major step, there are still massive hurdles for a new oil pipeline to be built, Jeff, including finding a private proponent and identifying a route.
Mackenzie Gray in Ottawa. Thank you, Mac. Environmental and Indigenous groups are now sounding the alarm ahead of that expected announcement in Alberta on Friday, worried it will further erode Canada's climate goals and put Indigenous communities at risk. One Alberta First Nation has launched new legal action. Our Heather Yerkes-West reports on the concerns over fast-tracking oil sands development.
A new energy deal may be popular in oil country, but not all Albertans are pleased.
We have seen impacts to wildlife, the lands and waters.
Members of the Mikisew Cree First Nation live in Alberta's north, about 200 kilometers downstream of the province's massive oil sands production facilities. For years, its leaders have alleged water contamination from the oil sands have been making community members sick. Now, it's taking both the provincial and federal government to court.
This lawsuit is not about one single project. It is the cumulative impacts of decades of industrial approvals and the failure of Alberta and Canada to properly assess and manage those impacts.
Chief Billy Joe Takaro says they decided to take legal action after the two levels of government moved to expedite energy project approvals to less than 120 days, something made possible by last November's MOU.
It's very troubling where the current federal government is headed. Yeah, I think they are effectively banning Canada's emissions reductions plan.
The group Environmental Defence Canada says the so-called grand bargain aspect of Ottawa's deal with Alberta falls so short that even with huge investments in carbon capture and storage, the country's emissions will rise with a new pipeline.
This math has been done. This MOU, if it goes ahead, even under the best case scenario, is going to add emissions to Canada, not reduce them.
6 North Pacific Coast nations say they remain steadfast in their opposition to a Northwest Coast pipeline, meeting last month with senior leaders of Pembina Pipeline and Trans Mountain Corporation in a bid to keep them from getting involved in a project the Alberta government plans to submit for approval next month. Heather Yurex, West Global News, Calgary.
And turning to breaking news from Alberta, where a judge has just quashed a separatist petition calling for a referendum on Alberta independence. Lawyers for several Alberta First Nations successfully argued that the province's referendum process is unconstitutional and failed to consult with Indigenous groups. They also argued Alberta's separation would violate their treaty rights. Last week, Alberta Separatists submitted a petition with more than 300,000 signatures calling for the vote. Lawyers for the province had defended the process with a referendum expected this fall. Alberta Premier Danielle Smith says she now plans to appeal.
Although our government does support Alberta remaining in Canada, we think that today's decision by the court will deny opportunity to well over 300,000 Albertans to have their petition verified by Elections Alberta. We think that this decision is incorrect in law and anti-democratic, and we will be appealing it as a result.
The separatist group says it disagrees fundamentally with the judge's ruling, and it also plans to appeal. The American president is now in Beijing for a meeting with his Chinese counterpart. The two-day summit between Donald Trump and Xi Jinping is expected to focus on improving relations between the world's two most powerful countries. It's the first visit to China by a U.S. president since Trump's last trip back in 2017. Jackson Proskow reports on the high-stakes summit.
Donald Trump touched down in Beijing, flanked by American billionaires from Elon Musk to Apple's Tim Cook, signaling the president's business focus during his two-day summit with Xi Jinping.
Both sides, I think, would like to see some stability in the U.S.-China relationship.
The timing is fraught for the U.S. Trump initially postponed this trip, hoping the war with Iran would be over. Instead, the stalemate in the Strait of Hormuz has dragged down global markets and risks plunging the world into a recession. Trump insists he's not expecting China to play negotiator.
We're going to be talking with President Xi about a lot of different things. I would say more than anything else will be trade.
What China really wants is a reduction of Trump's tariffs and access to American semiconductors to fuel the AI race. In exchange, Trump wants China to purchase billions of dollars worth of American planes and agricultural products and invest in the U.S.
I think that President Trump believes that the United States is in a strong position and has a great deal of leverage. But Xi Jinping also thinks that his country is in a very strong position. So these are two very confident leaders.
In the rush to make big deals, Taiwan remains a potential flashpoint. Ahead of Trump's visit, Chinese officials reiterated their resolve to crush the island's independence movement. Taiwan fears China may demand reduced U.S. arms sales and other concessions as part of any deal with Trump. Rarely have the stakes of U.S.-China talks been this high. In this moment of deep global uncertainty, neither side holds all the cards. Jackson Proskow, Global News, Washington.
A former Mountie has just been found not guilty of acting on behalf of the Chinese government. William Miker was accused of trying to coerce a Vancouver real estate tycoon to return to China in 2017 to face fraud charges. A BC Supreme Court judge said that she has doubts about the extent of the former RCMP officer's involvement. Well, the U.S. says it will immediately begin installing transponders on airport vehicles after that fatal collision in March at New York's LaGuardia Airport between an Air Canada jet and a fire truck. That truck did not have a transponder, which would have tracked its location and could have prevented the crash that killed 2 pilots. The Federal Aviation Administration plans to equip around 1,900 vehicles across the U.S. Health authorities around the world are closely following the fallout of the deadly hantavirus outbreak on a cruise ship. 24 Canadians have now been told to self-isolate or self-monitor as contact tracing continues. And Ottawa is now adding new measures to prevent the cruise passengers in other countries from traveling here. Heidi Petracek now on the concerns over a growing number of new confirmed cases.
Inside this Paris hospital, a French passenger from the MV Hondius is fighting for her life. She's on an artificial lung after contracting the rare person-to-person strain of hantavirus. She has the most severe form of cardiopulmonary presentation, he says, and has the last stage supportive care. The European Centre for Disease Prevention and Control has offered reassurance.
There are no indications that this virus is acting any different from the known virus circulating in some regions of the world.
The outbreak has killed 3 people who were on the ill-fated ocean excursion in the South Atlantic. Dozens more around the world are under quarantine or advised to self-isolate. No Canadians have reported symptoms.
We know in prior outbreaks of Andes virus that still there's a limited number of people infected.
Guidance from the WHO states high-risk contacts from the vessel shouldn't travel. So the federal government says it's implementing temporary measures to make sure those people don't catch a plane to Canada. Many experts have emphasized transmission is based on close contact, but some want a more cautious approach.
People, I'm afraid, tend to think of that means like you touched somebody, but close contact really means that you are sharing air with the person.
In an open letter, 6 scientists have called on the WHO to acknowledge that and apply precautions aimed at healthcare workers.
It's important for people who are caring for the virus patients to have full PPE, including respirators.
Experts around the world are now trying to fully understand just how this happened. Heidi Petracek, Global News, Halifax.
And another cruise is dealing with a different outbreak. French authorities are not allowing 1,700 passengers and crew to disembark this ship, which is now docked in Bordeaux after a suspected norovirus outbreak. A 90-year-old passenger has died and about 50 others are showing symptoms of the gastrointestinal illness. A medical team is now collecting samples to confirm the source and assess the risk of further spread. Health authorities are also stressing that there is no link to the hantavirus outbreak. Well, it's been an exciting 24 hours for Canadian women's hockey. The Professional Women's Hockey League has just confirmed that the city of Hamilton, along with Detroit and Las Vegas, will be granted expansion teams next season. And on the ice, a second Canadian team has just punched their ticket to the Walter Cup final, setting up an all-Canadian showdown. Eric Sorensen reports on the rapid growth of the women's game.
A big week for women's hockey in Canada. The Montreal Victoire have qualified for the PWHL Championship after beating Minnesota Tuesday night. They will join the Ottawa Charge, who made the finals on Sunday, which guarantees a Canadian team will win the Walter Cup for the first time.
As a Canadian, it's pretty exciting, I think, for Canadian hockey fans. There's a good rivalry between our fan bases with how close we are.
Welcome to TD Coliseum in Hamilton, Ontario.
But there's more for Canadian women's hockey. Hamilton is getting a PWHL franchise. As this promo shows, the league was impressed when 16,000 fans turned out for a game in Hamilton in January. Toronto Scepter's Renata Fast grew up in the Hamilton area and sees a rivalry with Toronto already.
2 teams that are so close in proximity and fan bases that are going to be a little bit divided throughout the GTA. So, I think it's exciting for Hamilton to have a moment like this.
The league is also expanding to Las Vegas, which it welcomed on Wednesday.
We are bringing you something that you will fall in love with from the very first puck drop.
The growth of the PWHL has been remarkable. The original 6 teams began play barely 2 years ago. Toronto, Ottawa, and Montreal, along with Boston, New York, and Minnesota. Last year, Seattle and Vancouver entered the league. Next season, Las Vegas will join, and 2 other newcomers, Detroit plus Hamilton. In all, 5 teams from Detroit across southern Ontario to Montreal, a hotbed for women's hockey.
Detroit and Hamilton, they have a lot of women's hockey, that minor hockey in particular, that are around those areas. Just as how much grassroots has grown around these markets, and they really want to see the game and they want to see it up close.
Canada's 5th PWHL team will be up close soon. An official kickoff is set for Hamilton on Thursday. Eric Sorensen, Global News, Toronto.
An historic court decision on First Nations. Coming up, the ruling that says governments violated child welfare rights. A Manitoba judge has found both the provincial and federal governments chronically violated the constitutional rights of First Nations. The ruling says they imposed and mismanaged a child welfare system that disproportionately targets Indigenous children. As Melissa Ridgen reports, it's the first court case involving what's known as the Millennium Scoop.
A $2 billion lawsuit accuses Manitoba and Canada of trampling the rights of First Nations to govern their own child welfare matters, instead apprehending yet another generation of Indigenous children in the 1990s and 2000s, known as the Millennium Scoop. In a nearly 400-page ruling, Manitoba Chief Justice Glenn Joyal said the defendants, through the manner in which they funded, regulated, and provided child welfare and protection in Manitoba, unjustifiably infringed on the plaintiff's Section 35 right. The judge went on to say, despite decades of public reports imploring change, policies and legislation didn't follow, perpetuating a system that disproportionately focused on apprehension of children instead of appropriate preventative services, even though most cases do not involve allegations or suspicions of child abuse.
This decision confirms what our nations have known all along, that Manitoba and Canada's child welfare system contributed to the gross overrepresentation of First Nations children in CFS.
For too long, First Nations raised these issues and were ignored while more children were taken from our communities.
Taking Indigenous kids from their families has been costly for Canada. From residential schools through the 60s Scoop and the 2023 federal child welfare class action lawsuit, settlements total around $40 billion. It remains to be seen how much the Millennium Scoop will cost. The judge in this matter didn't make a decision on damages.
I hope that the provincial and federal governments will not continue fighting us in court.
In 2020, Parliament decided to give control over child welfare back to First Nations, Inuit, and Métis communities to operate it by their own rules. But the handover process has been slow. There's only 19 communities that have their own child welfare systems, while hundreds more are still in the process. Melissa Ridgen, Global News, Winnipeg.
Royal comeback still ahead. Why Princess Catherine chose this small Italian city for her first foreign trip after her cancer diagnosis. Gunfire broke out in the Philippine Senate today as police moved in to arrest a senator who's wanted by the International Criminal Court. The former national police chief is accused of enforcing a deadly government crackdown on drugs under former President Rodrigo Duterte. There were no injuries, and it's unclear who fired the shots. King Charles kicked off a new session of Parliament in the UK today with the King's Speech, reading out Prime Minister Keir Starmer's agenda as he fights for his political future.
An increasingly dangerous and volatile world threatens the United Kingdom, with the conflict in the Middle East only the most recent example.
Starmer is defending himself against growing calls for his resignation, including from within his own Labour Party. In meetings with Labour ministers and MPs today, Starmer warned that any challenge to his leadership would plunge the party into chaos. The Princess of Wales received a warm welcome in Italy on her first official overseas trip in 2 years after undergoing cancer treatment. Catherine is visiting the town of Reggio Emilia, which is renowned for its work and investment in early childhood education. The Artemis II crew's diplomatic mission. Up next, the history-making astronauts pay a special visit to the nation's capital. Welcome back. Fresh off their historic trip around the moon, the Artemis II crew landed today in the nation's capital. The astronauts, including Canadian Jeremy Hansen, were in Ottawa for a series of events and took part in a Q&A at the National Arts Centre, where Hansen offered some sage advice.
You are going to run into obstacles. No matter where you're trying to go, you are going to be stopped, and you are going to think you have failed. You are going to think it's not going to work. That's just a guarantee. And that's when the people you've told are going to help pick you up and remind you that there is a path through, that you can create a solution.
The crew also met with the Prime Minister, and as Mike Armstrong reports, Mark Carney received a special souvenir from space.
This is the first time we've actually had a conversation on Earth, actually.
Their last call was long distance. Prime Minister Mark Carney spoke to the astronauts while they were in space. At the time, the Artemis 2 crew, on their way to the moon, promised the PM a gift.
Good on our word.
Fantastic.
So here, sir, is the flag that flew with us around the moon.
That is amazing.
Splashdown, sending post-landing command now.
Now, the Prime Minister, in exchange, gave the crew something from their return. The crew landed back on Earth April 10th. Carney gave them the flag that was flying over Parliament on that day.
This is the flag that flew on the day you splashed down.
Oh, wow.
That is awesome.
That is absolutely extraordinary.
Now, the crew had two other events in the capital. They met with students at the Canadian Museum of Nature, followed by a Q&A at the National Arts Centre.
What a great thing to come to Canada.
Both are the sort of thing they're getting used to.
Well, thank you very much.
The crew has visited the White House, the United Nations, and the New York Stock Exchange, and even dropped into Oprah's backyard.
I could see you're still looking at it like that actually happened.
Superlative thumbs up.
Since returning, the crew's new mission has been to pass on their passion. The goal is to inspire, to keep the public excited about space, and to keep politicians approving budgets. To do that, they do have some good stories.
Parachutes are opening. We splash down in the Pacific Ocean. We open our visors. This guy sitting next to me, he looks over and goes, "Now, I'm excited."
Now, Thursday, the crew will be just outside Montreal, this time not to meet fans. They're going to drop in at the Canadian Space Agency to see some of the Canadians who worked on Artemis 2 and who are working on Artemis 3 and 4. Jeff?
Mike Armstrong in Ottawa tonight. Thank you, Mike. And that is Global National for this Wednesday. I'm Jeff Semple. Tonight's Your Canada is sunny Ayot Nunavut. We love seeing your Canada, so please email your photos to globalnational@globalnews.ca. Thanks for watching. Donna will be back with you tomorrow. Have a great night.